Welcome back to the Colour Cave, everyone. My name's Jem and we like to play with art stuff. I am super excited to be taking on the Scrawler Challenge for February. We have such an exciting set of supplies to work with this month and a lovely simple prompt as well for a change. So it's really nice just to be able to get stuck in and see what these things can do. So I'm just going to gather everything together and we can get going. First things first, I selected the rougher side of the paper as we were indicated by the hint in the scroller box. I'm a person that likes texture, and especially working with things that are water soluble, it kind of suited me a little bit better. Just as an aside before we really sort of get into this, I actually did very little editing in this video. Normally I have to spend a reasonable amount of time cutting out huge chunks of what I'm doing because I like to sort of faff around, and I actually didn't need to with this, and I just thought that that was quite an interesting point. And I think the reason for that is because the Scrawler Challenge prompt was really simple. It was plumage, so the idea to do something feathery was obviously at the forefront of my mind. And I picked the subject because in a separate project, which is also on the channel, I am colouring in some of the nameplate pages in my adult colouring books, and I'm currently working on some peacocks. So I decided that with the colours that were available, a peacock feather was the perfect thing to be drawing. So the only additional tools that I'm using here is I've got a very soft brush there that you've just seen me scoop away some of the eraser dust with, and that was really just to stop me putting my big mucky fingers all over the picture. The other thing that I've used is Cotman watercolour brush, a round paintbrush, and a palette just to put the ink into so that we can mix it up and dilute it. Other than that, I have only used the supplies in the box. So you can see here at this stage, I've already started using the pencil and the eraser, and now I'm on to the aqua tint brush by Spectrum Noir. Now, for all of you that haven't got your box yet, there are no instructions in the scroller box as to how to get this pen working, and a couple of people have commented already. You have to take the plastic ring, there's a coloured plastic ring round the middle. You need to unscrew the nib and take that plastic ring off and then screw the whole thing back together, or else your pen will not work. I know this because I have used a Wink of Stella brush before and the very similar mechanics, so just a heads up there for you if you're waiting on your box. Can't have you sitting about trying to figure out why your pen isn't working. So the aqua tint brush, I really liked the delicate colour of this, and I knew that I wasn't going to get any sort of vibrant bold lines with it, so I was quite careful to sit down and plan out my colours and where each colour was going before I started. And when I diluted this with water, it gave the most delicate pale blush, and I kind of used it more for that than I did for actually colouring sections of the feather, which you'll see just shortly. While I very much enjoyed the hue of this particular brush, I did find my main issue, and it was one of the only issues I had when doing this, was that the ink flow out of the tip is very, very inconsistent. And I did mention that, I did touch on that when I was doing the unboxing, but that has continued, so it made things a little bit difficult for me, and it made me sort of reluctant to incorporate any more of it than I needed to into the picture. The Caran d'Ache pens were fabulous. They are so rich and they dilute so well in water, and it's really nice to have a felt tip pen essentially that does that. The one concern, and again the slight hurdle that I had to get over, was they bleed like crazy. So if I had figured that out and had the sense to work that out before I started, I would have done this part last, because you will see that it does start to bleed when I use water activated ink elsewhere. I have a few problems with it sort of leaking into each other, and it doesn't matter how dry it is, because I did actually stop and go away for a period of time to see that if letting it dry would make that, a little bit less. Here I am back to the aqua tint brush, and you can see that all I've done is take a wet paintbrush and go over the top of what I've put down, and it gave me such a nice little wash in the background. You can't really see it much on camera, but when you see the picture in the flesh, you can see that I've got this nice sort of muted background, and it was just a lovely way to add a little bit more rather than just drawing this feather in the middle of the sheet of paper. This part here, I just absolutely love the way the ink just completely melts away into the paper and that you can still see it. It gives such nice effects, and it's something that I would definitely use in the future, although I don't know if I would use this specific product for it just because of the inconsistencies, but it did blend out really, really well, and I just sort of sat back and looked at it and went, oh look, it's so pretty. And here came the fun part. Out comes my ceramic palette, which again, as I mentioned in the unboxing video, it's the way forward when doing stuff like this because the ink just sits together better and it makes it easier to mix than using a plastic palette. An old saucer or a plate does the same job. So I'm just squishing it in and just added in a little bit of water and got going and filling in around the inside of the eye. And you can see here straight away the blue, I'd literally just tickled it, and it's the blue felt tip, the Caran d'Ache felt tip started to bleed in straight away and gave me a strange sort of green colour. That could be a happy accident in some cases, but I wasn't particularly pleased about it, and I knew the more water I put on it, the worse it was going to get, so I decided to ignore it, and I went in with the lovely marker pens that we were given and just did my best to cover it up, knowing that I was going to blend out this colour as well. So having the paler yellow of the Caran d'Ache and also the Caran markers, that's confusing, Caran, having both and being able to mix them together because they're both water soluble, they played really well together, and I got a nice sort of effect with that darker sort of gold coloured pen on top of the felt tip of the Caran d'Ache marker, so I was quite pleased with that. Here I'm just doing a little bit of correcting for the bled out area after the yellow had dried, just to try and put a nice defined line back in there with that blue felt tip. After that, I decided it was time to move on to the centre part, and that was to be the same, using the same pen as the blue part that I just done, but a much more diluted version. And that way I felt that if I was going to get a bit more bleed, then I would be able to rectify it and correct it a bit better again once it was dry. And when I diluted that blue felt tip, the shade of blue, it's just lovely. Look at it, it's absolutely beautiful. Now I did take a bit of artistic license here, because if you look at a peacock feather, usually the darker blue part is in the middle and the paler blue is that sort of crescent shape that I've done around the outside. Purely for aesthetics, I decided to swap it round, but in the sort of bigger picture, it's probably worked out better in terms of the bleed situation, but I should have started with the diluted part and coloured the whole circle in that paler blue and then gone over it with the Caran d'Ache marker. So hindsight's a wonderful thing. This was by far my favourite part of doing this entire drawing. I'm using the dark green pen here, and the brushes on the end of these pens are just absolutely fabulous. I love them, and doing that big sort of swooping line down for the stem of the feather, if you like, it was just so much fun. There's just the perfect amount of malleability in the brushes, and it gives you so much control. And after that, I was just like, yeah, let's go to town. So here I'm just looking to where I'm going to start, and there I go. And I just literally sat and went, wee, and drew all these big sort of flicky lines with this brush pen. And it was the best fun. I really, really enjoyed it. To make sure that I used all the supplies, I decided to take the colourless blender here and squish out some of the tips of these sort of very fine feathery bits. I had a bit of an issue in the blender didn't really sit well with me. I found it left sort of, it was like bled out watermarks when I was blending colours together. And again, I did touch on that in the unboxing video. I shall leave a link to that in the corner and also in the description if you want to go back and watch that later. So I decided I would have to find another use for the colourless blender. And again, this just turned out really, really well to be able to soften up those lines from the outer feather parts. It added a really nice aesthetic to the piece, and it was really, really effective. I do think I could have sat, if I'd had a little bit more space on the paper around the sides, I could have spent a bit more time with that and really softening out those edges and pushing them right out to make it look a little bit more dramatic and centre on the feather itself a little bit more. But I was quite happy with the effect that it had and how it turned out. So here was me being brave and going in with the big guns. This is the purple marker. And I had to make sure that the blue underneath was completely dry because I didn't want to have another sort of bleeding fiasco after the part at the bottom. And it's quite difficult again on camera. You can't really see the difference between the purple and the blue. They kind of look the same, but to the naked eye that you can see the difference. So I used the colourless blender here just to sort of squish this out a bit and get a nice gradual tint back down to the blue. And I have to say it worked very, very, very well for that. What I was finding though is that the paper itself, it didn't take as much of the ink as I would have liked. I would have fancied waiting for it to dry and going back over with a couple of layers, and I just felt that on top of the fact that it had already soaked up some of the water from the dilution underneath, I just felt like the paper wouldn't be able to cope with it. And I don't know whether it's because of that combination of water and ink, but I wasn't really prepared at this stage to start putting holes in the paper. And the same thing happened with the Caran d'Ache felt tip pen here. When I was tidying up, I was actually starting to pill the paper slightly, so I was just a bit kind of disappointed because I was hoping that the paper would have been able to cope with a little bit more abuse, for want of a better word. So that's just something to note. You can't really scrub away at this, especially if the ink is still damp and you're going to go back over it, because the paper won't take it without any damage. I was going to put some black in on top of the dark blue crescent at the bottom, and or possibly the purple at the top, but for the aforementioned paper reasons I decided against it. So I decided then just to sort of put a little bit of definition and a little bit of dimension into the paler blue area, and all I did was I used the same ink from before but a heavier concentration of the same ink, so it allowed me to have a very, very gradual gradient and just some parts that were slightly darker than others. So I'm just going in here with the fine liner and doing a bit of sort of tidying up. I did feel that overall most of the inks bled into each other just a little bit too much for my liking, and I wanted that really sort of sharp contrast between the dark colours in the middle and the yellow around the outside. So the fine liner did a great job of that, of giving me a nice crisp line and just sort of tidying up those slightly feathered bits. Speaking of feathered bits, I felt that the green feathers around the outside were looking a little bit sparse, so I just went in again with the fine liner in the same sort of hand motions that I used with the brush pen, just to add a little bit of, I don't know, just a bit of interest in there, and that kind of prompted me to go back in with the green pen and really thicken those feathers up and make it look a little bit more sort of lush and luxurious. At this point, I'm really just doing a bit of tidying up and some finishing touches. I think there was a great danger of me overworking this and ending up in a sort of splodgy, bled out, slightly damp mess. And it's one of those occasions where I had to resist the urge to keep going and just appreciate the feather for the simplicity that it is. And it's something that I struggle with really, really badly. It's like, I have to make this more intricate, I have to do more to this. But I'm really glad that I decided to stop, because I do think I would have ended up ruining it. So overall, I was reasonably satisfied with the outcome, but I have to say this is one of the most relaxing scroller challenges I've ever done. And of course, the most satisfying part is taking the tape off at the end. So I've got that all out the way and just sat back and admired my work. I'd love to hear what you think of this. Let me know in the comments, and I hope you have enjoyed watching, everyone. Thank you for joining me. You can check out some more scroller boxiness here, and there's also some links to my social media if you'd like to check them out, or more importantly, share your creations with me, because I would absolutely love to see them. We'll be back in the cave soon for another video. See you later.